specifically the original Shepherd Square public housing development. When I was born, my mother was almost 16 years old, Male High School, and from there raised me in public housing in Smoketown for what it lacked in economic resources. It was a wonderful place due to the people resources. And a lot of that was facilitated by the Grace Hope Presbyterian Community Center. And so one of those individuals being Camp Evans. So I would be remiss to be before you and not recognize Camp as a mentor and someone who not only impacted my life, but impacted so many, as well as Grace Hope as an organization in the Smoketown neighborhood. So, once again, I'm Delquan Dorsey. I do community engagement and supply diversity. And the reason why my title is so long is because in JCPS usually wear at least 2 to 3 hats. And so, but I'm happy to be before you. I try to be as brief as possible. Just want to give an overview of our department and talk about some of the things that we do, within JCPS. Okay, so our department's been there for some time, maybe not a title, but since going back to during the time of busing, we've had someone in leadership in central office at JCPS, making sure that that we as an organization are doing everything we can to bring about equity. Now, with our office, most of the work is on the foundation of the racial equity policy. And the racial equity policy was voted on by the Jefferson County Board of Education back in May of 2018. Now, what's so special about this policy is probably only maybe 12 in the country that's for school districts. And when you look at those policies, out of all of them, ours is probably the most comprehensive. That's not only just a policy, but it functions within the metrics of our day-to-day work within central office and the schools. And during the time when we did have the racial equity policy, just to give you a little context why it's so important, the Kentucky Department of Education was actually looking to take over JCPS. And fortunately, we had been doing this work all along, so it wasn't something we just pulled out our pockets to be reactionary. We had been doing this work for over a year and a half with the community, with think tank leaders, not only locally but nationally. And so this policy and its intentions and its tools have been very helpful. But the main parts of the policy is, of course, central office commitment. Each one of our departments has racial equity goals and that they have to meet as far as how it impacts not only schools, but students and families. Programmatic access, looking at our programs within JCPS, gifted and talented, magnet programs, academies in Louisville, and making sure that we are doing everything possible to be inclusive. In some cases, some of our programs have not had the diversity of the overall student population. And I don't know if you know this, but for the first time in JCPS's history, the district is majority students of color. And so when you consider that JCPS is not only one of the biggest school districts in the country, but is probably the biggest school district in Kentucky, and what education means to the economic impact of not only Louisville, but the whole state, it's important that students of color are successful and that they have what they need to be to move forward. We also looked alignment within that is not only the academics, but also the behavior challenges. There are disparities there. Staffing diversity, we're trying to do everything we can, not only to get more teachers of color, but get more principals and leadership of people of color. And then, of course, curriculum and instruction. We heretofore, students of color have consistently lagged behind a majority white population when it comes to academics. So what are the things that we can do that we know are best practices in order to improve those outcomes? Because when we improve the outcomes, it's not only just good for students of color and families of color, but everywhere because of the economic impact. Part of our role is actually staffing the Advisory Council for Racial Equity, which is also part of the policy. And that council is made up of JCPS staff, community civic leaders, and students. Of course, Dr. Polio is our superintendent, and without his leadership and support, we cannot make any of this happen. Like he always says, the buck stops with him. And then under him, of course, my boss, Dr. John Marshall, is the Chief Equity Officer, who is purely, he's passionate about this work, and he does everything he can to make sure that we're doing all we can to make sure we're serving the district and our students and our schools. Now, a little bit more about my role, supplier diversity. Basically, when it comes to JCPS, JCPS has one of the biggest budgets in the state out of any civic organization. And in Louisville, it is the biggest real estate owner. And so when you consider that level of budget and that level of economic impact and infrastructure, then it's important that we make sure that how we procure and the stuff we buy and spend money on, that is just as inclusive. Why? Because one, we are funded by you all, the community. And then Louisville is a diverse community. And so that funding and that investment should also mirror itself when it comes to providing business opportunities. And we know that recently you heard a lot in the news about we needing to build more schools in order to be competitive with other urban areas. And so in order to do that, it's important that not only those large majority-owned companies, but also some of the smaller companies, some of the companies owned by people of color as well as women, have opportunities with doing business with JCPS. And so that's my job, making sure, one, we're doing everything to reach our goal. We have a goal of, for each project, 15% minority-owned business participation, and then 10% women-owned. I also do what is called a Dorms Conference, which is a conference where we reach out to potential first-generation college graduates like myself in their family, and make sure they got all the information they need and all the resources. It's understanding financial aid, understanding all the challenges that go along with attending the post-secondary institution, and we also provide scholarships. So some of the things that are within our department, because a lot of people don't know, not even this stuff goes on at JCPS, let alone in one department. But we have the Louisville Teacher Residency Program, which is where we strive to bring in more teachers of color so that students can see themselves. And not only students of color, but also it's important that majority white students also see teachers that look like other people from diverse communities, because that has an impact on them and their decision making. And we all know all high schoolers within 5 years are in the workforce, right? And so it's important that we prepare our students to be able to compete in a global environment. We have employee resource groups like most corporations, but we realized that we needed something in order to keep the retention of our employees. Site-based decision-making councils, they're within our department. which is kind of like the governing structure for schools. We have a team of teachers for equity. They're like our specialists that helps. Some of our teachers, while we have this policy and while we're trying to make these improvements, we recognize that some of our teachers might be from a different background and might not have all the knowledge that they need in order to be effective, but they have the heart. And that's what it's mainly about, having the heart to have impact on our kids. And so we work with them and we make sure they have all the resources and all the technical assistance necessary in order to be effective, regardless of what school they're teaching in. Satellite offices is basically an office we created so that in neighborhoods where families cannot get to Van Hoos or they can't get out to certain areas for parent-teacher conferences, then we provide that opportunity for the school to come to the neighborhood in order to be able to meet with families. And then of course, Girls on the Rise and other programs that we do in order to enhance and build up the confidence of our students during school and out of school. NAACP Community Forum, which is kind of like tonight, what we're doing here. The NAACP has worked with JCPS all the way back since, and what the goal of that is to make sure that you're not only just hearing from the superintendent, but you hear a little bit more about some of the work of the departments and leaderships in JCPS and making sure that we asking those tough questions. The racism hotline. As you all know, we've experienced some challenges and social justice issues in our community. We want to make sure that folks, regardless of your background or your faith, that you have a opportunity and a resource where you can call in anonymously and get the support you need. Then literacy and programs. Those programs are targeted for 3rd to 5th graders, and we know that at 3rd grade is where we can tell, based on reading scores, the trajectory of our students, especially students of color. If they're behind in reading, then it's going to be extremely hard for them to be successful in the classroom later on. So what we do is we try to mitigate that issue with our out-of-school time programs. Literacy N is basically literacy in swimming, literacy in karate, literacy in robotics. And so students not only learn about the end part, but they do it with a book that's complementary, and that's one of our more popular programs. Of course, Access and Opportunity Department, where we serve our houseless, I don't like to say homeless, our houseless students and families who may be in transition. We try to get them to support their need. Our Black Student Unions, making sure students have voice. This is Black Student Unions, typically taking place in most of our post-secondary institutions, but the students in JCPS have asked for this, and were already organizing. So what we do through our department is work with them so that they can understand the process of addressing policy and issues that impact them. And then of course the speaker series, in which we use where we bring in national and local experts to discuss education issues. We have our Equity Institute. That's another opportunity where we train our teachers on things as far as equity, not only as far as teaching the curriculum, but various dynamics that the students of color are dealing with within their community. Then of course, diversity hiring, and then our clothing assistance program, which is one of my favorite. It's actually located at 15th and Muhammad Ali, and is doing tremendous work. Now, Educators of Color Celebration is one of those programs where we I actually helped start that, and I'm very proud of that. And we didn't realize the impact it was going to have, but we needed something to address the attrition. And true enough, it's not a silver bullet, but it does bring some pride to let the district lets the teachers know, especially our teachers of color, where we've experienced some attrition. It lets them know that we appreciate them and we need them and they have a sense of pride. Justice Now is one of our newer programs that is picking up some steam and have been in partnership with the Kentucky Derby Festival, and just took place recently, where students actually, it's kind of like Shark Tank, where they make pitches, but it's more on social entrepreneurial issues. And it's really, really cool. And one of the results is a play, I believe, that they're recently showing that recently some students are doing at Actors Theater. And then, of course, Envision Equity, our monthly publication. And so I just wanted to, this is just a big overview of our department and some of the work that's taking place. There's even more stuff going on. But I want to invite you all out. A lot of you all have heard about the new student assignment plan, and we need the community engaged as much as possible. So I'd like to invite you out to the Louisville Urban League Norton Sports and Learning Complex this Tuesday at 6 p.m., where we'll be discussing some of the dynamics of what that new student assignment plan will look like. And so if you have any more questions when we do Q&A, I'll be more happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Delquan. Jim, you're up.
All right, good evening. So, unlike Delquan, when we moved to Louisville when I was in second grade, shortly thereafter we moved over, originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We moved over in the Highlands area, and I went to St. James, little Catholic school over there on Bardstown Road in Eastern Parkway. And we got to see the pulpit and got to come up here as part of the routine when you're Catholic. But unfortunately, I had a bit of a discipline problem, so I spent very little time up here. And I went to school, I'll be 54 in a few weeks. I went to school when they were still paddling, so that was a lot of my education about what happens when I get up here in the pulpit. But no, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me again. My name is Jim Beckett. Unfortunately, Dwight Bradford with the West End School head will not be here tonight, so I'm going to pinch it a little bit, but I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. I am married, going on 19 years in about 3-4 weeks. To my wonderful wife, Angela Ray Beckett, who grew up in Cecil Avenue, not too terribly far, well, not as far from Shepherd Square, but down in the West End. And our son, Holden, who is 14, is an 8th grader at the Walden School and will be heading to YPass, which I'm very excited about, and he's excited about in the theater program. I think it was more difficult for him to get in YPass than it was for me to get into law school. So, I'm surprised I don't look like Frederick Douglass after that aging process. But I was thinking about a few things. I was really hoping Dwight would be here. I have been mentoring at West End School, but just a little bit about what I'm doing currently in Louisville. Probably about 22 years ago, I found my purpose. And it was right around the time when myself and Delquan and about 10 other black professionals, so we were all much younger then, started the Urban League Young Professionals. And we started the Urban League Young Professionals because we felt like we just weren't doing enough. We were incredibly blessed with education and opportunity, yet every month we held our meetings on 15th and Broadway, and we looked around and saw most of the community that looked like us struggling. And we were just like, we're put on this earth to do a lot more than just progress and have our first home and be able to put our kids in nice schools, which is all wonderful things, and our parents, and we're standing on the shoulders of people who sacrificed a heck of a lot more than any of us probably ever will and ever consider. So they are cheering us on, but we need to do more. And in that moment, my mother shared with me a book called The Children, which was about the civil rights movement in Nashville. And many people don't know about the civil rights movement in Nashville, but it followed what was known as the Greensboro Four in Greensboro, North Carolina, which got a lot of press. But in Nashville, names like John Lewis, who I'm sure you all have heard of, and Diane Nash, these are all first-generation college and graduate students at Fisk and Meharry and Tennessee State. And their parents had not gone to college, right? And these kids decided that they were going to stand up to the social injustices that were going on. And their parents thought they were crazy. They're like, what are you doing? You're in college or grad school, you've got to make it. And they said, you know what, it just doesn't matter, because if we don't do this, then what do we stand for? And I read that book, and a little fact about me, I was born 2 minutes before Dr. King was pronounced dead. I was born on April 4th, 1968. I have a very large tattoo on my arm of Dr. King with his birthday, with my birth date and the date he was assassinated. Interesting story, my mother-in-law got a tattoo with me before I actually was married. It's a whole other thing. My wife doesn't like when I share that story. But anyway, and my mom would always tell me, you know, your purpose here is bigger. And I never really understood it, but I kind of started to understand my purpose 20-something years ago. And so fast forward to now in 2022, as mentioned, I run what's called a social impact generational transformation development company. We design, plan, but what we're doing is creating a new space in what people call development, where we are going to recreate neighborhoods through people. So we're giving the power to the people in the neighborhood to design and plan their neighborhoods. But here's the catch, okay? Louisville is a ridiculously philanthropic city. We write a lot of checks. We have great foundations that write incredibly large checks. But we focus on the symptoms, right? So people are hungry, so let's write checks and feed them. People need computers, so let's go get them some laptops. And then a week later, hey, they're still hungry. Let's feed them again, right? Nobody stops and says, why are they hungry? What are the causes of these incredible gaps in equity that we have? And those are hard. So I run a company called Reland Group, and when myself and my 3 partners got together, we said, we're going to go figure out the hard. As he said, we're going to do the end at the beginning. In other words, while we will build beautiful structures in our most marginalized and forgotten and underinvested neighborhoods, we're going to figure out the causes of the gaps in education, housing, jobs, health and wellness, and environmental justice. Why? Because we're supposed to. Because if we don't, who's going to do that? Raise your hand if you know a developer who's like, we're going to fix these problems, right? It doesn't happen. Okay, that's why we're really not developers. And that's my purpose. And I was just sharing what's really exciting when you know it's your purpose is things don't scare you like they used to. You don't worry about what's going to come out of your mouth. You just do good work. I mean, this guy's dedicated most of his life to doing good work in this space. And so I'm volunteering at the West End School. Been doing it for the last 6 years. Well, just real quick. And so we're working on a project in a neighborhood called Park Hill and Algonquin. Probably about $150 million environmentally regenerative project where utility bills will hopefully be zero, where the neighborhood will design, where it'll have the look and feel of the neighborhood, and where in those 5 different equity buckets, we're gonna get people who want to solve the hard. And it's amazing when you know your purpose and you know you have to solve the hard, because you can look at these very large companies or financial institutions, and it's funny, I used to sit in the meetings and I would never have it on a t-shirt, for God's sakes. I would have on my tie and, you know, thinking about my sales pitch and this, that, and the other. And now I'm like, here's what we're gonna do. You in or out, yes or no? And they kind of stare at you. And it's not for everybody, and it's okay. You just need one. You just need one that says, I'm in. That doesn't mean we haven't figured out. It just means we're going to work really hard to do that versus I was sharing having, in Louisville, we like to have 150 meetings, tell everybody, oh, this is so awesome. And then like 150 meetings later, you're like, what have we accomplished? Nothing, yay. Right? We're not going to do that. And so in this neighborhood, we're going to do what I used to say is show people how you do impossible. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to flip it completely on its head and show this city exactly what happens when you care. And this direct correlation between how successful we all are in Anchorage or Prospect, I live in Dorton Commons, how there is a direct relationship between the success of West End and other marginalized neighborhoods and the success of us and our children out here. We don't quite grasp that. We don't get that. We write checks, and we feel good, and checks are good, don't get me wrong. That's not solving the problem. So 6 years ago, I decided that when we moved back to Louisville, that I was going to at least start doing get re-engaged, and so I was introduced to the West End School and met the Blairs. So the Blairs, Mr. Blair was the head of school at KCD when he decided that he couldn't deal with the gaps in education, and so he and his wife started the West End School in 2005. Middle school with, I think, 3 kids to start off, and grew it into the school it is now today, over 130 students, not just in middle school, but pre-K all the way through 8th grade. And I go every Monday. I used to go every Tuesday, every Monday. And when I first started, I was with the 7th and 8th graders. And then I moved to now the 2nd and 3rd graders. And so I am very disruptive, and I can, I have a law degree and I practice law, and I can be very analytical. It's very difficult for me, but I can try to be analytical. But I like to go in there, and the reason why I mentor, I'm not on the board at this wonderful, incredible independent school, accredited school, free tuition for those kids who are either who get free or reduced lunch, who have the ability. But I look at those kids, and they're me. I had 2 parents, very educated parents, who sacrificed a lot to send me to St. X and then Indiana University, and then they cut me off. So I had to pay for law school myself, but I wouldn't have been able to do that but for them. And I go in that school, and I tell my 14-year-old son, who's been down there with me, and he's been down to Park Hill to see this development. He's interviewed residents who live in Parkway Place public housing, who look at that LG&E substation every day and look at that brownfield that's been sitting there for 20 some odd years. Could you imagine that? And I think, wow, just by God's good grace, not because my parents are smart, not because I'm really good on my feet and can speak, right? I've presented to boards of directors at Wall Street and lived in Puerto Rico, and God's grace. That's the only reason why I'm up here. That could be me. That could be my son. And so I'm committed going there every week. I've moved a whole lot of meetings, and it's not hard, who want to meet with me Monday morning, but they know Jim from 9 to 11 is going to be at West End School. It's a non-negotiable, because they have to see people that look like me. And I don't go in there and tell them about how hard they need to study and you need to get A's, and they have perfect educators to do that. I'm there to help them understand that the possibilities of the world out there are incredible. And that every one of those kids has incredible greatness inside of them. And that they just have to know they can use it. Right? That's my job. I'm very disappointed at a lot of other black professionals that aren't, I don't care if they go to West End School, but are comfortable. If you're comfortable, we have a problem. I mean, we'd love to blame a lot of the inequities on white people. Oh, white people, right? There are a whole lot of black people in this city who have the means to make incredible change like that man's doing right there. Delquan could get paid a whole lot more money doing a whole lot of other things, right? Where are you? It's going to take all of us, absolutely. And I'm excited about walking my purpose and knowing that we're going to make big change in this city as long as I'm here. And those kids at West End School count on people like myself and volunteers like Ann to come in, to let them know that you care and to be there every week and and to let them know the possibilities are absolutely endless. But what they can't do is bring the equity. And I'll tell you a real quick story, and then I'm going to shut up and sit down. And I'm happy to answer questions later on. I think we're going to do that. And so I appreciate you indulging me. One of the things, if you were to go back to my corporate personnel files, the man just cannot be concise. That's really kind of my track, so I apologize. That, especially coming up here with no notes is very dangerous for me. When I first started at West End School, there was a kid in 7th grade named Mercy. Mercy was from Africa. Really rough journey getting here. Parents very poor. And he ended up going to Walden School. I had no idea about this. Actually, that's not true. I did know he went to Walden School. So then my son went to Walden School about 4 years later. And I remember seeing Mercy in the hall. I'm like, hey, and he was smiling, Mr. Beckett. We're hugging and laughing and so forth. So my son made the decision that he wanted to go to a larger school. Walden's been wonderful, one of the greatest schools. And thank God he wouldn't be the kid he is today, but for Walden. But we loved the head of school there, and so we went to their open house for high school. And I couldn't go that night, so my wife took our son, and Mercy was his chaperone. And Mercy's a 12th grader, right? Getting ready to go to college. And my wife comes back and she says, Mercy was our tour guide. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. And she's like, guess where he wants to go to college? And I said, where? She said, Fisk University. I'm like, Fisk? Well, that's where my mother went to school. My mother's from Nashville. And I'm like, I had no idea. So let me tell you how the ripple works. Let me tell you how equity works. Let me tell you why I mentor and why we're in these positions that we're in and why you have to be engaged and you have to listen. It's not about the checks all the time. It's about the connections and the effort. So I pick up the phone and call the general counsel of a company called NerdWallet. His name is Nkumene Losange, black gentleman, who was a Fisk graduate, a very active alumnus. And I said, hey man, I got this kid that I used to mentor X number of years ago that's trying to go to Fisk. And there is no way he can afford to go to Fisk. I don't even know if he can get in. I don't know anything about his academic stuff. I just know he's applied. What can you do? He said, say no more. So we get together a few weeks later. He says, okay, give me this, 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 and this. So he calls. Next thing you know, I'm getting copied on emails to the executive vice president of Fisk, who now wants to talk to Mercy. And they get on the phone and have an interview. And then here's where the equity comes in. Mercy's counselor at Walden drove Mercy and another student down to Fisk to tour the school last week. The counselor drove them to Nashville to give them a tour to meet the executives, and he's been admitted to Fisk, and they're going to give him a lot of money. Now, so is Center College, so he may be at Center. But the point is that he now has options. And if he wants to go to Fisk, he's got people that are looking out for him. That's what we're supposed to do. That's equity. That's how you close gaps. But to do it in a mass scale, we all have to jump in and be uncomfortable and do it. Okay? It's hard, it's uncomfortable, but it has to happen. And so that's a little my purpose. A little snippet about the West End School. I apologize. Dwight would have done a much better job talking about West End School, but I would encourage all of you all to come see the incredible things happening on 36th and Virginia Avenue. It's an incredible, incredible thing that Dwight is leading with his staff and these young boys. It'll be worth your time, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Mayghin, you're up.
Hi, y'all. Let me get my thing up here. Give me a second. Try it this way. Hi, I'm Mayghin Levine. I'm the Director of Programs for the Cabbage Patch Settlement House. I have been with the Cabbage Patch for going on 11 years now. While I'm currently the Program Director, I started as the Educational Opportunities Manager. It was our Educational Opportunities Manager who wanted to be with you here today and could not. But she has put together a fantastic presentation I'm going to share with you all that really talks about the Cabbage Patch, our commitment to education, and how we're working to help remove some of those barriers that have been talked about so eloquently by Jim and Delquan, and really work on walking alongside our kids. Since my predecessors had the chance to talk about the pulpit, I will too for a moment. This is a very new experience for me. When I grew up, my church did not have a pulpit. We had a big stage with a rock band behind it. And so this is very different. This is very formal, and it's a bit strange. I got dressed up not knowing what to expect. My church was jeans and cowboy hats back in Oklahoma. So here I am in heels. But no, I would have worn tennis shoes. I'll be a little more comfortable, but that's all right. So I am very honored to be speaking to you all today and to be included in the company of such amazing people doing amazing things for the youth in our community. And I wish that in my childhood, growing up in the church, there had been conversations like this happening. My church was very focused on our community, but there was a lot of separation from the people who were marginalized. You know, I'll be the first person now to acknowledge I grew up with an incredible amount of privilege. I grew up comfortable with two parents in a large home, coming from people who had gone to college. And education was a given for me. When I was young, it was not an if, it was a where. And it has just been pushed into me from day one that I was capable, I was smart, and my parents would ensure that wherever I wanted to go, I could. So it surprised them when I decided I wanted to teach. They were expecting law or seminary. My grandfather would have been real happy to see me behind a pulpit. But when I decided I wanted to do education, and specifically my degree focused on the kids who are called exceptionalities, who fall above or below kind of the standard line of commonality among students. It was a surprise, but it's worked out okay. I wish that I had had conversations like this to expose me to these things earlier, to help me know I could leverage that privilege earlier. And I'm so pleased that all of you are here to help to leverage your privilege to make some of these changes. So a brief bit about the Cabbage Patch. The Cabbage Patch is on 6th Street, right next to Central Park. We have been around since 1910. We were founded by a woman named Louise Marshall, who was fond of describing herself apparently as rich, flawed, and female. It's a pretty good description. And if anyone lived a Matthew 25 life, it was Miss Marshall. She was a daughter of privilege. Her family lived right next to where the Cabbage Patch is today. She came from money. She came from power. Her great-grandfather was Chief Justice John Marshall. So this is a family that had privilege to execute. She could have married, lived a very comfortable life in a large house. She could have spent her wealth any number of ways, and what she chose to do was found the Cabbage Patch. She was a Sunday school teacher at a Presbyterian church and found what she called a long love affair with reaching out and walking with and supporting the least of these. In the case of the founding of the Cabbage Patch, that was largely immigrant communities. As the Cabbage Patch has moved on for 110 years, 111 years, 112 years this year, that has moved on to primarily being children of color. That's the majority of our kids who come to us. A lot of them are coming to us from the West End. They're coming to us from California, from Parkland, from Algonquin, from farther down Dixie. We're seeing our kids come in, primarily kids who are living at or below the poverty level. This isn't someone that we reach out and say, this is who we're gonna help, but these are the folks who've come to us, and have always come to us. And so these are the folks that we know we have to meet where they are and walk with them to help remove some of those barriers. So I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about our Educational Opportunities Program and how we have, in knowing what those barriers are, worked hard to develop a system that really wraps fully around the kid and the family to help remove those barriers so the kids can walk forward and move forward in their lives and their educations. So we start early. We believe that everything we do at the Cabbage Patch, from basketball in the gym to art class upstairs to the homework helper program, is part of putting into these kids that education is not just a possibility, but an expectation. We do this in we have 3 key programming areas. We have our educational opportunities programs, our recreation and youth development programs, and of course our family development programs. I'm going to focus mostly on the 2 that specifically touch kids, although we will talk a little about family development in a minute. So the first of those, the obvious one, is educational opportunities. What sets us apart from a lot of out-of-school time centers is that education for us is a all-day long prospect. A lot of places have power hours where they dedicate a couple of hours a day to homework help. We have, from the time the kids come in at 3 until the kids leave us at 9 p.m., we have homework help for them. 4 folks dedicated to nothing but education. 2 of them master level teachers, all of them with at least degrees in an academic field. So the kids are seeing people and talking with people and getting help from folks who have been in a classroom and know the realities of those educational gaps and barriers which exist to help the kids overcome them. We offer tutoring. We offer test prep. That's ACT tests, that's high school entrance tests. We really realize the systematic inequalities that exist in testing and have existed for a very long time, and work to make sure that our kids know how to move within and around those systems. We do academic enrichment, kind of the literacy plus kind of things that Delquan was mentioning. We do STEM programming. We have a group that comes in called BEA, Beautiful As You Are, which helps to empower our young women. Actually started by a fantastic Black woman named Tish. She is spectacular. If you ever want to get encouraged and positive about yourself, Tish is the woman to talk to. We also focus on multicultural education. We want our kids to have a broad worldview. We want them to see other people who look like them, people that don't, and really work to understand those cultures. So that's all part of our Educational Opportunities Program. What might seem less obvious in terms of being connected to education, but still for us is a commitment to education, is our recreation and youth development programs. Absolutely everything we do ties back into prepping kids to move beyond us. In our ideal world, at the Cabbage Patch, the ideal thing would be that we were no longer necessary, that everyone was stable, everyone was able to achieve their full potential. That's the best case scenario. But until that's the case, we want to make sure everything we're doing is helping to build these kids up and make them stronger, more whole people. So everything from athletics, visual and performing arts, outdoor exploration. A lot of our kids don't have the chance to get outdoors and get outdoors safely. So we're going to take them hiking, biking, canoeing, fishing, all the things I did as a kid, all the things that several of the folks who founded the Cabbage Patch did. We want to make sure kids have access to the same experiences that other kids have access to, because experience translates into real-world application, real-world interest. We also put a lot of focus on leadership development. Talk more about that in a minute. And our summer camps. Summer camps are something that we want to make sure every kid has access to, both educational ones and recreational ones. We want to make sure that's part of the kids' experience as well. A lot of our programming is moving into what we call our College Scholar program. So we're building up our kids, building in that expectation I had as a child, not a if, but where or what. And while it's called our College Scholar program, we really realized in the last few years that what we're really saying is an advanced education program. Not every kid's going to go to college, and that's okay. We have kids right now who've gone through nursing programs, who've gone through technical training programs, who've gone through hands-on mechanics programs that are living fantastic lives and are fulfilled. They are walking in their passion day by day. And while we know that not every kid is going to college, we want to make sure that every kid is planning for something beyond high school. So we're moving in toward this College Scholar program. So it is about college preparation, it's about mentorship, it's about scholarship, It is financial, yes, but it's also about academics and support. A lot of places, as Jim mentioned, a lot of people like to write checks. They love to see our kids who are struggling, who need another $5,000 to go to school, and they love to be the person to write that check. A lot of organizations love to be the people to write that check, but they don't keep the connections with the kids. They don't answer the phone at 2 a.m. when the kid is struggling. They don't know what to say when the kid says, I'm ready to drop out now, I'm done. When they show up at the patch on a random Friday afternoon, I quit, I'm out. We want to make sure that our program is a full wraparound approach to helping these kids get ready for, into, and through college. So the first part of that is removing the barriers. Okay? So we want to make sure that college is something that is absolutely demystified for our kids. We want to make sure that they know that college is an option, that education is an option, that advanced degrees even, if they want it, are an option. We make sure it is absolutely clear that this is something you have the option to do. You have options. We also make sure that there is scholarship there. We do provide money. It's a small part of what we do, but the money is important. We provide additional financial assistance during hard times. We're not just writing a check for their scholarship. We're the people they call when they've lost their dorm key and they have to have a $25 down payment to replace it, or when they don't have enough gas to get home for someone's funeral. We fill those other small gaps where we can. And then personalized support and guidance. We offer academic help. Our kids are used to being with us for help. They come to us 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. They're in that education room. If they have a project due tomorrow, we're probably going to stay and keep the lights on and let you stay till midnight if you need to. We keep that going during college. We're still the people they call. Sometimes it's a little above our pay grade, some of the work that comes in, but we find someone who can help. We make the connections. We also look at transportation. We talk about class management, scheduling, the kind of things that if your parents went to college, you're probably comfortable and familiar with, and they're ready to share with you. If they didn't, you need someone who steps in who has. And we get to fill that gap for a lot of these kids. We're privileged to walk with them and fill that gap. And of course, employment and internship opportunities. And really what we want to emphasize with our kids is that education is the priority. No matter what you do, no matter what you choose something, choose more. That is the key. We do academic intervention plans. We give access to materials when they need it. We try to remove every barrier to these kids struggling and saying, I'm out, I'm done. So a little bit about our College Scholar program right now. Right now we have 37 kids in college, which is really exciting for us. 30 of them are part-time, full-time, 3 are part-time, 4 of them are in grad school. We see more and more of our kids as they've been exposed to college, realizing they can do the second degree. If we're able to help them get that first degree at a low cost, they're more likely to choose advanced degrees, which is exciting. On average, we give about $3,000 per year to each of our college scholars. It's not a lot, it's certainly not enough. It's what we can do, and it's what the commitment we've made to those kids. And the average GPA for our kids is a 2.95, which is pretty spectacular. Keep in mind, this is post-COVID. This is this year's average GPA. Our kids, we'll talk more about COVID in a moment, our kids struggled with that transition, but we were there to help them move through it. So again, how we support our college scholars. We talk about it from step 1 all the way through. We start identifying our kids in 6th or 7th grade that have an interest in advanced education, and we follow them through the full process. We do ACT prep and college readiness. We do debate clubs. We do quiz bowls, the kind of things that for younger kids really engage them and get them going and thinking about college. We do homework help. We do communication, personal guidance. We have what we like to call an open door policy. There is no time that you cannot contact someone about college. I have taken the 1 a.m. phone call where a child says, a grown adult in college, which I knew her when she was small, says, I have an interview tomorrow, are moccasins business casual? Yeah, you parent them with slacks, you're fine. So that's the kind of thing that they know. They have a relationship with us that is deep and abiding, and as for a lot of them has been there for years. They know they can call at 1 a.m. and ask that question. I mentioned COVID. We all know the realities of COVID, what they were and what they still are. We really got the chance to lean into our kids during that time. So we were going and delivering food, dropping it outside their doors. We were helping them move out of their dorm rooms with 2 days' notice, renting vehicles, renting storage units, whatever we had to do to alleviate the concerns for those kids getting out safely. We helped them navigate online classes. When everywhere else was closed, our staff opened up our doors and brought them into our computer lab, gave them a space, gave them the materials they needed, gave them the support they needed, masked and distanced. We made sure that we really leaned into them in a time where a lot of students struggled. The dropout rate during COVID-19 was astronomical. During COVID-19, not a single one of our kids dropped out of the college program. We were able to lean in and support them, and we are very proud of that. So I mentioned our leadership development program. We'll talk a little bit about this. We're doing this little game of life here. This is our power up. We focus on leadership development at the Patch, and it's something that we are committed to over the next 5 years as part of our strategic development planning to really emphasize youth leadership from all levels, from the time kids get to us at 8 years old until they leave us in the College Scholar program. There is structured, built-in development of their leadership potential. This comes in a variety of forms. We have our young leaders and junior leaders, ages 8 to 12. So those kids are really focusing on spiritual development. We have a wonderful curriculum that several of us built as a staff that focuses around the fruits of the Spirit. So emphasizing love, joy, peace with our kids. We want to build those skills up and make them whole and developed people before we send them out into the world. We want to focus on cultivating empathy for other people, people with diverse viewpoints. And we want to make sure that we're developing a sense of charity and a heart of philanthropy for our kids. So they're doing small service hours within the building, helping to tutor another kid perhaps, or being a buddy on our tour programs. And so that's starting to get them thinking about empathy and philanthropy themselves. Our teen leaders, ages 13 to 15, we're focusing on developing personal responsibility, broadening their worldview, and really building a strong sense of self. This is also where we're starting to build some of those really strong relationships with staff that let the kids know they can make the 1 a.m. call about the moccasins. This is where those relationships really, really lock into place. We also open their first bank account with them. We offer them a $50 a month stipend to be part of the leadership development program. Half of that must go into a savings account for advanced education. The rest they can spend however they want. For a lot of kids, this is their first access to financial institutions. This is the first bank account, the first check, the first debit card, and we get to be part of that with them. From there, we go on to our teen employees. This is ages 15 to 18. We focus on developing job skills and professional habits. So they are working on career exploration, building their resume, that's right over the top, practicing interviews, and also practice budgeting and really getting into high-level financial literacy. This is where we also start talking about loans for college. We start talking about interest rates. We start talking about what your withdrawals are going to be when you get into college, what you're going to have to pay for. And we talk about things like taxes and why, yes, you have to pay taxes. Nobody likes it, I promise, but you do. So we get into the higher level financial literacy there. We thrive, as all places do, on partnerships. We currently have a couple of partnerships that we have been able to connect to folks and build up those connections to support our kids in their development. So we currently have partners at UK, U of L, JCTC, and Bellarmine. Each of those offers special scholarships to Cabbage Patch kids that reduce the cost, have a guaranteed flat cost of no more than $4,000 a year. So we know our kids are graduating with an amount of debt that is reasonable. Obviously, we want to do less than that. Like, anybody out there knows a college that will let us just say, yeah, put your kids in for free, we'll take it. But till then, we're just trying to help manage, remove that financial barrier that I didn't have to worry about. So many of you, I'm sure, didn't have to worry about. We want to make sure that's the same for our kiddos. I'm going to skip through some of these about the individual partnerships. This is a presentation we often do to other partners, so a little bit of patience. I can hum the Girl from Ipanema if we want to. There we go. So really, the goals of our program are to successfully graduate our current scholars within 5 years of their college entrance. The national average for a 4-year degree right now is 6 years. We want to see our kids do better than that. We want to have 50 kids in college by 2025. 50 kids per year, which means turning over the graduates, putting new ones in. We want to see our freshmen go from about 8 to 10 of them each year, which we have now, to anywhere from 12 or 10 to 15. We want to bump up the number of kids we're putting through every year. We want to see that GPA increase if we can. It's not a big emphasis for us. The importance is getting the education, not necessarily the numbers that are attached to it, but it's still there. We're also going to be building a college and career readiness center because we know that it's important to push beyond college. We get them thinking about college, about training. Now let's think about what comes after. And of course, increased number of partnerships with schools. That college and career center is something we're really excited about. It's the other piece of education that's currently wrapped up in our strategic planning for the next 5 to 10 years. College is a bridge and not a destination. It's one of the big sayings of our executive director. He was coming to us from experience in the community college system and knows how underrated that experience is for a lot of kids. And one of the great things that community colleges do wonderfully is they focus on what can you do with the degree. Not just the degree, but how do you apply it. So our goal with the College and Career Center is to have that focus as well. So we're going to look at expanding our space and our services. We currently own the house next to our center and we rent it out. We're going to try to renovate that and turn that into this college and career space. So it's dedicated, controlled space for those kids. We're going to look at career planning for all ages, starting as young as our 8-year-olds. Our leadership programs will be housed there too, so kids get in that space and comfortable with it and used to it. Overcoming that barrier of it seeming so far away. We do mentorship and internships, resume and interview help, and we're also going to have a parent-focused program for our adult learners. Because we know if we are supporting our kids and we aren't doing everything we can to help make families more stable, to help walk along with the adults as well, then we're doing those kids a disservice. We can be helping both, and we really foresee our College and Career Center as doing just that. In case you're wondering how you can help, I'm not going to ask for money, I promise. What we are looking for is often we find our college kids going off to college without the basic stuff that a kid goes off with. So we'd welcome any donations of school supplies, of dorm room items, the kind of things that make life a little more comfortable when you're there. We mentor scholars, looking for mentors for scholars with career goals in fields. We're looking for engineers and architects and doctors and nurses and people who want to really get in one-on-one with a kid and be that connection. We want to see you share job opportunities. It's a lot of times, my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, it's not what you know, it's who you know. We want to know who you know, who has job openings, who has connections for our kids. And of course, providing inroads to developing partnerships with colleges and other organizations. If you know someone who's dying to help kids get into and through college, connect us. We will help them make the most of that. That covers everything we're doing. I know it's a lot, but the biggest thing we're doing is, the most important thing is developing relationships. From the time they're 8 until they leave us, we are building deep and abiding relationships with these kids and walking alongside them, letting them know that college, advanced education, is possible. It's the expectation, and it's totally and completely doable. And I'll be up here with these gents to answer questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. I'm going to pass it off to Ann to guide us now.
Thank you. So if I could have our speakers come up here, please, where you can see them all a little better. We promised some time for questions and discussion, and I'm feeling overwhelmed by what we where we could go with this. Oh my goodness, isn't it? I'm so thankful we have people like this in our community, aren't you? Okay, so I'm learning to ask difficult, uncomfortable questions. Personal goal for me. In all fairness, I kind of gave Jim a heads up about this, and he said it takes a lot to make him uncomfortable. Anyway, you've all, in a way, touched on mentoring and the importance of role models. So, Jim goes to West End School on Monday mornings, and I go to West End School on Friday mornings. And I work with kids on their writing, and I love it. You will not find a more polite, gentlemanly group of middle schoolers than the ones that I work with there. Okay, so here's the deal. Here's the tough question. Pretty obvious. Jim's a black man. I'm a white woman of East End privilege. Is it important for me to be there? Should I stay home? It's obviously important for Jim to go, and you mentioned that more black professionals should be out there and interacting. So, what do you think?
That's not really a tough question, so thank you. No, first of all, I applaud you. We all have to be there. And so I think it's critically important for you. I mean, there would be no West End School if it wasn't for the Blairs, and the Blairs were white. I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation about the West End School. And when I got there 6 years ago, there were very few black teachers or black volunteers. It was mostly white women. It may still be mostly white women from a volunteer standpoint. I mean, they've done a pretty good job of bringing in some black teachers, but I don't see a lot of me running up and down the hallway. In unfairness, I'm there one day a week, so I'm not going to pretend to know that. But I think it's critically important. One, it's all about your lens, right? If you stay in one place your whole life, then that's going to be your lens. And I think the more we stretch and go to different places like West End School and engage with kids and learn a lot. You know, we do some listening, crazy concept, right? We always want to teach. We do some listening, ask a lot of questions, and hear. I always tell people I probably get more out of it every Monday than they do because of what I hear and how it continues to shape me as an adult and as a father and as somebody who is walking in purpose. So I think it's absolutely important that whether you're white or black or brown, that you engage because they need that. The one thing that has to be the common thread is you care and that I'm forgetting my very basic simple word, but that you're dependable, that you're going to be there, because there's nothing worse than popping in and hey, and then boop, that's it, or it's spotty. Right. I would prefer you just not come, because that has quite a negative impact on the children when you do that. So, yeah.
Delquan?
I just think that regardless of your background, I mentor actually a group of students at my old high school at Atherton through one of our programs, and it's like you said, I probably get more out of it than the students do, but just when you hear them talk about the impact, or they talk about the benefits, or when they're seeking you out, you know, that's the biggest reward. You can't put a dollar sign on that, but it's really important, us being people of faith, that you know, God created us to have full and well-rounded lives. So actually it's important that you find opportunities and take advantage of them as blessings when you have the opportunity to engage with someone from a different background than yourself.
Mayghin, at Cabbage Patch?
I think the gentleman said it perfectly. It's about where you come from at it, like where you're coming at it from, not about where you're coming from. Miss Fish is one of our regular volunteers. This lead fish back. I don't know if she's Miss Fish here. That's strange.
She is.
Okay. Miss Fish has been a part of the Cabbage Patch for I don't even know how many years at this point. 25.
Wow.
And you talk about being consistent.
Yeah.
Every child who interacts with Miss Fish knows that they are loved and that they're cared for and that they are seen, truly, truly seen. And I don't care who you are, there could be no better experience for a child than that. Also, you know, I understand the question and I understand the concern. There are times that being a white woman and a white woman who grew up and came from privilege, I question if I should be where I am too. You know, being in charge of this program that's doing so much. I don't have the lived experience. I know that I have to surround myself with people who do and listen to them above everything else. I can't be the person who decides where things go. I just have to help execute it. And that's what you're doing too. You're helping to execute a very big and important vision. All of you are. We just have to realize that it can't just be us. It's part of something bigger. And we have to listen to the people who are living the experience every day and be there to support it.
Okay, other questions?
The summer slump is a concept that you're out of school in the summer, and when you come back to school, you struggle for a while, or you take more time to catch up. Research has shown that more privileged people don't have this problem as much because of programs that they're in the summer. Jim mentioned that, I believe it was at around age 8 is when you start to know that children struggle with reading, or you're able to see that by their reading level how they're doing. Yet it seems most summer programs start around age 8. Is this something you all have noticed for kids that are younger in your respected areas, or what can we do about that, especially as people from the East in Louisville? Any thoughts?
You know, I take it. I think one, being involved with organizations like Cabbage back in West End School, and you always welcome to volunteer at our programs too. I think not only at those earlier ages, but also we have a lot of programs for younger students, but it's a challenge for some of our older students. But and that's what's really cool about the Cabbage Patch. Actually, my cousin was on that screen.
Oh my God, really? Which one?
Yeah, Javon Brand.
Oh,
Yes. And
Juju's one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I shouldn't
Juju.
say I have favorites, but you do.
Yeah, but he's an example of you know, just that support. But yeah, summer slump is real, and I think one of the things that you all can do is one, reach out to organizations, Metro United Way, Evolve 502, organizations that are kind of like the hub of a lot of the activity. But volunteering at those programs, writing checks are still nice, but just really finding out what's going on, and really, what is your passion? Understanding your passion. If you miss fish, your passion is young people, but you might like to fish. You might like working on cars, or you might like building things. And it's tremendous opportunities for that. And I like our Lit In program. So, and don't forget about the older kids too, because that's where I'm really pushing now, especially with Academies of Louisville. We're looking for employers to create job shadow opportunities, internships, and co-ops. That's where that's where the opportunity to change Louisville is. If we could bring, especially some of our students of color, to get them more comfortable in environments, professional environments, and you'd be willing to mentor and show them things, that could be a huge, huge impact.
Well, traditionally what the Cabbage Patch is called a community center. Kind of the new fancy term for it is out of school time center, which means that we get the privilege of picking up where West End School or JCPS end, where their day ends, ours tends to begin when their school year ends. Doesn't really end now with all the wonderful things you all are doing with Evolve 502, but where school stops, we pick up. So we get to do a lot of the summer work with the kids. We have spent a lot of time thinking about that summer learning gap, And it's true. On average, for children who live above the poverty line, it can be 1 to 2 months lost. For kids who live below the poverty line, you're getting into anywhere from 3 to 6 months lost in terms of learning, and that's almost the entire time you're in school, which is crazy. So we design our summer place programs around educational recovery and closing that learning gap. We still do educational opportunities during the summer. We have evening enrichment that goes from 3 to 9, just like we do during the school year. And that is still tutoring, and that is still academic worksheets and advanced kind of things like that. But it's also the Lit Plus kind of things. So it's things like a STEM camp the kids can take part in. It might be an outdoor education camp where they're learning about life cycles while going out and wading in the streams. So we're trying to make education fun. We call it sneaking it up on kids. And just having access to those things, having access to summer camps. We've taken our kids out of the country. A few years back, I took a bunch of teenagers to Canada. And that was a life-changing experience for them. Leading up to that, French lessons, French cooking. Leading up to that, we talked about geography. We talked about First Peoples in our multicultural camps. A lot of education can happen in summers with a little bit of effort and, of course, with the kind of funding you need to be able to access those things. Where a lot of kids can pay for it, we try to make sure that barrier is removed. Never turn a kid away if they can't pay. Never.
Hi. I have often thought that there are, of course, for children from at-risk homes who may not have good role models for how to make good choices in life, that it would be so wonderful to teach some philosophy and ethics at the high school level. So most of those are college level courses. And, we don't know, there are a lot of children who don't go on to college from Kentucky. And is that something that's ever been talked about at JCPS in terms of curriculum content?
Yes, that's something we actually our department focuses on a lot. I'm sorry, our department focuses on curriculum a lot, and then not only with not necessarily with some of the decision-making stuff per se, but really looking at how can we get our students to think. And, heretofore, school, in a lot of cases, is about sit and get. And our department, actually, we're trying to work with teachers and educators on how can we make our students and their experience a little bit more Socratic, where they're able to think for themselves regardless of the situation, and teaching them how to approach and problem solve.
Critical thinking stuff.
Yes.
I'm wondering about standardized tests that tag children from a very young age, and they are as historically, culturally skewed.
Yes.
And I'm wondering about how they are dealing with that as you all.
Oh, okay. Well, actually, there's a plethora of tests, not only inside of schools, but when our students leave schools, you think about it, there's various licensing tests, ACTs, a lot of tests that culturally are created, but because of the way they're developed, they can be barriers to accessing those opportunities that are tied to that test. And so a lot of it is when you all come in contact with information like this, being able to share it with your family members and your network about the various people that work in organizations that sometimes have tests, even as far as to become a teacher. We've noticed that the teacher licensing, the practice is rough, and it's even more rough for those who are people of color. And so I know for a fact what's being done though. For instance, I'm also on the board at Metropolitan College, which is the partnership with UPS and JCTC and University of Louisville, and we just recently made it to where ACT is not a requirement alone. I think Western Kentucky has done some other things, and a lot of other scholarship opportunities are very similar. So, but as far as standardized tests, that's really a concern where you all as citizens and voters, that's something that you could talk to your elected officials about, because JCPS does not create those standards. They come from Frankfurt, and those are those are standards that are upheld by statute.
I think this will be our last question from my friend Susan.
Hi, this might be one of those awkward questions. I just decided I would go on and throw it out there. I'm just wondering, with the current violence that we're seeing in Louisville, particularly gun violence, how is this impacting your programs?
How's it impacting the programs? Well, I'm gonna defer to folks who have very structured programs and spend a lot of time looking at them. I will just say this: the core is poverty. The core is not bad people. Okay, and so when we think about violence, it obviously has a horrible impact. I'm sure that I'll defer the floor, but the core is poverty. And so think about if you had nothing, right? What would you do? And so I think it's how we have to think about these things, right? Where folks don't have opportunities. We think they're just making bad decisions, but I mean, there's a whole lot behind putting a person in that position. And so, but its actual impact on the programs, I will defer to folks who are actually running programs and studying these things.
There's certainly the direct impacts. That earlier this year, we lost one of our kids to gun violence. The young man was getting a snack in a convenience store. He had nothing to do with the altercation. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was a very sweet kid. One I was able to go back and find pictures of when he was in, I think, 5th or 6th grade during Talk Like a Pirate Day in a paper eye patch and a fake hook. And so we've lost kids. Only one this year, but others before. And that's a very direct impact, to the other kids around him. The kids who come every day and suddenly this kid's not there anymore. It's also an impact to the kids more than the program, in that these are kids who are experiencing loss in a way that I can still not imagine. They're living with it day by day. But they're still coming to us at the end of the day, and they're needing to be loved, and they're needing to be cared for. And more in the last couple of years, they're needing someone to listen and talk with them. We've recently started we've always had a behavioral interventionist on staff, someone who counsels the kids in when they first come. If they have to be, to take a break from the program because of behavior, counsels them back in. And more now, that person's having to sit and talk through trauma. We're all in trauma right now with COVID. Something I keep trying to tell people and have people understand, everyone is in trauma. But these kids that come to us every day, are in levels of trauma that we cannot imagine. And all we can do is validate those feelings. Tell them it is okay to be angry. It is okay to be scared. It is okay to feel rage. It's reasonable and human. The question is, what do we do about it? How do we help them? So we have invited in police officers, Black police officers, white police officers, to have conversations about community violence, have conversations about the systemic racism that exists in many police departments. We've invited folks to come and talk to them about what activism is and how to use that anger, that understandable, justifiable human anger, and that fear, and that sadness, and help make it better. We can respond kid by kid and program by program. But the big thing is helping them understand the bigger world, the bigger causes, and what they and we can do to help remove those causes.
Yeah, and I just add to that, you know, we have gun violence issues in every one of our communities. And, you know, going to Jim's point, we got to look at the conditions, kind of like a root cause analysis. Desperate people do desperate things. But then also we got to be honest about ourselves and understand, okay, what is causing these situations. I, myself personally, through my family, have lost victims of gun violence on both sides of the gun. And, you know, when I think about that, you know, I look at myself. So far I hadn't, thank God I hadn't been in that situation. It could have very easily been in that situation, coming in the community with dealing with those conditions. And what made the difference was a place like this, with people like this, having a church in the community that cared, but also not just caring by saying they cared, but when I was of that age of quote unquote at risk, and I could not find opportunity to work, the church created opportunities for me to work. They make sure I had means to go to college, just like Cabbage Patch did. And so it's really about, but I'm just one kid, and there was so many more kids that deserved those resources and deserved that support, that friends of mine that I know were way smarter than me, way more talented and gifted, and are no longer here with us. And we just didn't have more of what I was blessed and fortunate to receive. But more specifically, what JCPS is doing is we've come up with a safety plan. And the safety plan looks like having safety administrators inside buildings, not so much someone with a law enforcement degree or a law enforcement perspective, but having someone more like a social work perspective that are looking and understand the root cause analysis that causes violence. And so, you know, it's kind of like the metaphor that was told earlier, you know, what are we doing to address the hunger? What are we doing to address the conditions in which we take place? And we know that whether it's in West Louisville or Ukraine, gun violence takes place everywhere. It's just about understanding it and what's our role to addressing it. It might be calling that legislator that we continue to vote for, but continues to allow the legislation to continue to pass. That doesn't restrict. There's nothing wrong with hunting, but yet at the same time, what tends to happen and take advantage of are, in some situations, even I've heard in West Louisville before, where just bags of guns have just been dropped off on a street corner, access for kids. And so we just have to really look at, you know, ourselves in the mirror and our network and have these conversations when we're not at church. And yes, they're difficult conversations, but we serve a mighty God that can help us deal with those difficult conversations.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. Really, really appreciate your time and especially what you do in the community. So thank you for coming. I do want to end with something on a very positive note, and I promise this will be quick. Just remember how important it is to connect, and that's been said over and over again, and each of you in your arenas can affect change because you care and because you show up. And when kids are given support, here's what can happen. These lines of poetry were written last week by 8th grade young men at the West End School. This was an assignment I gave them. I promise I did not prompt the answers. I read them a couple of lines that would be true about me, and I said, write some that are true about you. And this is where these 8th graders are, ready to set out into the world of high school. Each line is from a different 8th grader. There are only 6 of them. I used to be quiet, but now I am a lion. I used to be a pebble, but now I am a mountain. I used to be the debris, but now I am the path. I used to be a seed, but now I am a tree. I used to be soundless, but now I am thunderous. And this last one you all can finish with me. Because of our setting, you'll probably get this. I used to be lost, but now I am found.
Amen.
So,
Amen.
oh, one quick thing. I think we've already got linked, John,
Yes,
the
on
presentations.
On the website, on our Matthew 25 page, we have these 2 presentations linked just like we did last week as well. So
Right.
if you couldn't read it, you want to go back and study it, it's on our website.
And as far as West End School goes, I have a piece of paper. Thankfully, my friend Kyle helped me out with getting this from the volunteer coordinator, who's another person who fell ill. Anyway, I have paper. I will be up here if you're exiting this way. I'll give it to you if you're interested in volunteer opportunities there, and there's more on the back table if you're going out that way.
And lastly, Jim, can you come up here and tell us about next week, which is our very last one of this series, and I'm sure there'll be more to come in the future. But tell us a little bit about what's happening next week.
It's going to be a real simple one. It's healthcare. No, we've got 3 experts, all with different perspectives about the situation with, I guess we use the word equity a lot, or lack thereof in our community. T. Gonzalez works with the health department. I don't know what his official title is, but he's the guy who knows all the data. And Kelly McCants is a cardiologist who's also the director of the Norton Center for Health Equity. That's a mouthful. And then the third person is a friend of mine named Liz Edgel, and she is the manager of the it's the Refugee and Immigrant Health Services for Family Health Centers at our Americana site. So it's a lot of very interesting people, and I hope you all come next week. So thank you.
Go in peace, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, man.
Great job. Yeah, I was just